Hello everyone, it's Imran here. Welcome back to another video. So, I was supposed to react to this video yesterday, but obviously I didn't get the opportunity because I had a severe nosebleed yesterday. For those of you who don't know, I suffer from severe nosebleeds. I do, and I had one while I was having a bath yesterday. Of worst time to have one I was, so I wasn't able to film any videos yesterday because I was forbidden from recording afterwards. Because if I look at a screen for certainly too long, I tend to get a headache, which in turn the headache causes a nosebleed. It does. So yeah, this is why this video I'm pretty much a day late on this video and why I didn't upload any videos yesterday. It stings. It was unfortunate. It was, but I guess sometimes you can't record. I guess I can't upload at every opportunity I get, even though I'm subscribed to a lot of channels. I am. But anyway, I'm going to react to the special, Thomas and Friends audio special. It is by Kiefer Adams. Kiefer has teased this for quite some time. He has, as he did say that June 2nd it would come, and it did, which was obviously yesterday it was, and obviously it did come. And that, of course, is Sodor's early beginnings. So this is obviously going to talk about the Northwestern Railway's early days in the TVS canon. Remember, Kiefer only does his story set in the TVS canon, not the RWS canon. All of Kiefer's audio stories are set within the TVS canon of Thomas, with even Magic Railway being canon to the TVS canon. It is. So all the stories that Keith has done, it pretty much is pretty much uh pretty much a set within the TVS canon. So this obviously is going to it's going to give us an insight of the Markland engine when the Markland engine first arrived on the island, obviously. And it's going to talk about Edward having to deal up with uh, a rude stuck-up crane called Preston, and how Preston and Edward had to work with him during the railway's construction. So yeah, this is definitely going to be exciting. So this is actually an anniversary story for both the Railway series and the TV series together, because this year marks 79 years of the Railway series. Obviously, it'll be 80 next year, so hope for some big celebrations. And last week, funny enough, I reacted to Thomas on television, which was a tribute to the TVS as a whole as part of his 40th anniversary. You do want to see me that out? I'll have it up in the top right corner of your screen. But anyway, yeah, this is quite a long audio special. Since an audio special, it's slightly longer. It is just over 20 minutes long, so yeah, I'm really excited to see how this audio story plays out right here. Link to I'm reacting to in the description down below as always. Sorry if I spoke too fast right there. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and get straight into this.
Sodor's Early Beginnings, written and told by Kiefer Adams. I tell you what, Gordon said one night in the shed, the Fat Director had never seen an engine quite like me at the big station before when I first arrived. I was one of Gresley's earliest designs. He took one look at me and said, Gordon, you are the most boring engine that has ever told this story for the past 3 days, Thomas interrupted from the corner of the shed. The engines were surprised. Don't be so rude, James sniffed. I'm sorry, but it's true, said Thomas. Can't we have a different story tonight for a change, instead of how his lordship came to the island? All right, Thomas, said Edward, that'll do. He turned to Gordon. Thomas does have a point, he said. You have been telling this story for quite a while now. But it's better than little Thomas's arrival to Sodor, said Gordon. Ooh. I came to the island with style and grace. He was just brought here because we didn't have a shunter. Quite sad, really. Thomas rolled his eyes. But luckily for him, Edward had managed to stop the conversation right there and then. Ooh. You can tell that story another time, he said finally. Right now, we must get some sleep. It's another busy day tomorrow. Gordon reluctantly agreed, and soon the engines were all asleep, except Thomas, who mostly sulked throughout the night.
Wow.
Thomas was in a foul temper the next morning, and I'm sorry to say that the truck suffered most. Ouch! Ow! Stop it! Ow! Please stop! They groaned. Be quiet, Thomas snapped. Percy could tell that Thomas was not in a good mood. Are you all right, Thomas? He asked. No, I'm not, came the sharp reply. I swear, Percy, if Gordon tells that story again, I will wish steam at him. Percy completely understood. I know how you feel, he said. He kept telling me that story when I first arrived. Do you know, he says that we tank engines never had a proper arrival. Well, that's not true, said Thomas.
Yep.
If it wasn't for me, James would still be in that cowfield, and I would have not got my branch line. And if it weren't for me, Percy added, the engines would still be on strike. As the day progressed, Thomas's mood went from grumpy to feeling rather unhappy. By the time Thomas finished his work for the day, he was completely miserable.
Oh.
Edward arrived, having just shunted in the yards for the day.
I have that feeling right there when you feel grumpy at first, but then, and you end up taking your grumpiness out on someone right there, and then you start to feel guilty about it, and you just feel miserable. You start off grumpy, and then by the end of the day, you just feel sad and miserable. You do, and that's what happened to Thomas right there.
To see Thomas looking glum. Are you all right, Thomas? He asked. Not really, Edward, said Thomas sadly. I'm sorry for my outburst last night. You've got nothing to be sorry for, Thomas, said Edward. Do you know, if you hadn't told Gordon to stop, I certainly would. It's just he's told that story for the last 3 days, said Thomas. I'd like to hear a new story. He then remembered Marklin, a little tank engine that had come from another country, that had been the station pilot before Thomas arrived. What was Marklin's first day like? He asked. Edward gave a small smile. Now there's a story I haven't told in a while, he chuckled. It was lucky that the other engines hadn't returned yet. Edward took a deep breath, and this was the story he told.
Here we go.
Long ago, when the North-Western Railway was still practically new, Gordon, Henry and Edward were the main engines running the line. In those days, Sir Charles Topham Hatt, the Fat Controller's father, was still in charge. One morning, Edward was waiting to collect his passengers at Wellsworth Station when Gordon huffed into the opposite...
Ah, that's supposed to be the TVS versions of 98462 and 87546, aka Alfred and Craven right there. So, yeah, that is something a bit unexpected right there. To see Alfred and Craven in the TVS canon.
Platform, looking rather grumpy. What's the matter with you? Asked Edward. I'm just glad to see the back of those loaned engines we had, said Gordon.
Yeah.
They thought they knew everything round here during their trials. I'm glad the Fat Director saw sense and sent them away in disgrace. Edward smiled. Cheer up, Gordon, he reassured. The Fat Director's just ordered another engine. Oh, goody, said Gordon. However, continued Edward, the Fat Director says that this engine's come from the other side of the world. How thrilling, said Gordon. It was lucky for him that the guard had blown his whistle.
Behaviour
He didn't
rubbed
want
off
to
Gordon.
hear any more of what Edward had to say. Edward chuckled and puffed away once his passengers were on board. The very next morning, the new engine arrived. Edward was shunting Henry's stopping goods while Gordon stood at the platform of the big station with the express. The engine came into view and was quite a sight indeed. He was a black tank engine with 6 red wheels, 2 lamps on his front, and the strangest looking couplings the engines had ever seen. Gordon's mouth gaped open. That is working in the yards?
Look at Gordon's face just in the background right there. Edward's like, well, Gordon, here's your new shunter. Gordon's like, what the hell? Where's that engine right there? Oh, Gordon's face just in the back. You could just see right there, just Gordon's face in the background. It's just so random.
He said. "That is our new engine," boomed a voice from the station. Sir Charles came out of the office and strode down to greet the new engine, who was looking around at his new surroundings. "Marklin, I presume?" said Sir Charles. Yes, sir," replied the engine nervously. "Welcome to the North Western Railway," said Sir Charles. "I trust you've had a pleasant journey." "It was all right, sir, thank you," said Marklin. "Wonderful," said Sir Charles. "Edward here will show you what needs to be done. I'll leave you all to get acquainted." And Sir Charles returned to his office to sort out his paperwork. "Welcome to the North Western Railway, Marklin," said Edward politely. "Pooh!" snorted Gordon.
Come on,
"That
Gordon.
won't last 10 minutes on this railway." And he puffed indignantly away. "Don't listen to him," said Edward. "He'll warm up in time." Marklin had his doubts. By the afternoon, Edward had shown Marklin around the yard and what needed to be done.
So that's Preston right here.
He went to collect some trucks from another yard for Henry's train. As he did, a voice called out to him. "Still carrying the old-timer's promise, I see, Edward." Edward looked over.
So that's Preston
and
then.
there, watching him, was Preston. Preston was a small crane who had a limited lifting capacity. Ever since he had arrived, he had given the other engines grief. In those days, he was the only crane available on the line, as the breakdown train had not yet entered service.
Okay.
The old-timer he referred to was Bloomer, one of the earlier engines on the railway that Edward had been good friends with.
Shout out to Jet the Hawk 1994, by the way, who actually told me that Bloomer's not an OC character. I don't know why I thought Bloomer was an OC character, but he's actually a character created by Reverend Wilbur Awdry himself that apparently we never saw a lot in the Railway series.
"As a matter of fact, yes," replied Edward firmly. "At least Bloomer did a lot more work in his day than you could have ever done since you've been here." "Oh, goodness me, Edward," Preston exclaimed. "Aren't we in a foul temper? I'm not surprised. You'll be replaced soon." "Don't start this again, Preston," said Edward. "There's too much work to do to listen to your claptrap." "Puh!" Preston huffed.
Claptrap.
"I'm surprised,
Good one,
Edward. One of these days, more engines will come to the island, and you three relics will be nothing more than scrap on the side of the yard."
Ooh.
Edward rolled his eyes.
Ooh.
He was used to Preston's ranting. He found the trucks for Henry's train and puffed away, ignoring anything else that came out of Preston's mouth. A little later, Gordon was resting in his siding when Marklin puffed up. "Do you actually do any work?" he asked cheekily. "Now see here, you," said Gordon. "The Fact Director didn't bring another engine here to be rude and disrespectful to me." "The way I've heard it, it's quite a different story," said Marklin smugly. "Where I come from, engines treat each other with respect and decorum." "Pah!" Gordon sniffed. "I have both those qualities." "But do you give it to others?" Marklin asked. "From the looks of things, you only care about yourself." "Why, you little insignificant—" But before Gordon could finish his sentence, Marklin let out a great cloud of steam. "Whee!" he
I was going to say that.
Gordon jumped as the smoke
Marklin did it for me.
billowed everywhere. "When you decide to do some proper work, let me know," Marklin chuckled, and he puffed away, laughing at his own wit.
That's how Gordon got on bad
scolded
terms with
Gordon.
Thomas right there, because of
"The
Marklin's
next
behaviour.
engine to arrive after him better show me some manners." Luckily for him, Marklin was too far away to have heard. The next morning, Edward bustled about the big station. Marklin was getting ready to take Preston up the line to build a new section of track. Preston was feeling very pleased with himself. "Today's the day, Edward," he boasted proudly. Today I proved why I'm the pride of the line. Today you might prove you're a nuisance, Edward retorted.
Yep.
Marklin soon shunted a truck full of new rails behind Preston. Edward looked on. Do be careful, he whispered.
What a jerk.
This
what a jerk
one
Preston
thinks he
is.
knows everything.
If Preston existed in my... I think Preston will probably exist in my timeline, but if he exists, I'm pretty sure he would make good friends with the Diesels right there. Because of just of how his behaviour is right there. Saying they're all heap of scraps, and he would be the one to lift them up into the scrap
I've
yard.
dealt with his type before, said Marklin. Preston just grinned. Soon, Marklin was out and away with Preston and the rails needed. Edward could tell that Preston wouldn't cooperate with his job. Before long, Preston and Marklin arrived at the new section of line that was being built. The truck of rails was placed in front of Preston. The little crane soon set to work, with Marklin taking Edward's advice and watching him carefully. Preston decided, though, that he was going to do a lot more work than what he was capable of. The next thing Marklin knew, he had picked up 3 sets of rails instead of 1 at a time, as instructed by the foreman. "Don't do that!" cried Marklin. "Why not?" Preston said. "I can show that old iron what I'm capable of."
This is not going to end too well.
Trouble. There was a horrible grinding noise as Preston began to lose control of holding the rails. "Look out!" cried the foreman, and he and his men ran for cover. Marklin backed away just in time as there was a great crash. The pieces of track dropped to the ground and Preston keeled over. "Oh, my crane arm!" he cried. He was in great pain. The foreman was furious. "Take him away," he ordered. "We'll find some other way of setting down the rails."
Yeah.
Marklin did just that. He took Preston away, the crane wailing in pain. Edward had just finished his shunting when Marklin brought in the battered and bruised Preston.
Wow.
The crane had not said anything since Marklin had taken him away from the work site. "I can't say I'm surprised," said Edward as Marklin left. Look, Edward, it was just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" said Edward.
He's not too happy.
"You've taunted me and my friends since you've got here, get into a silly accident, and you say it was a misunderstanding?" "But Edward," began Preston. "I don't want to hear it," said Edward. "I don't usually judge others for the way they behave, but you are a disgraceful crane. You should be ashamed of yourself, Preston."
"Put him in his place, Edward."
Preston thought about this. But of course, it was too late for him. Preston was sent away the next day. The fact director didn't have time for a crane that was disrespectful to his engines. And from that day on, Edward's judgment of cranes had since remained.
Oh, is this a reference to Edward Strikes Out right there? Because obviously in the TV and Harvey to the Rescue, because obviously we had Harvey to the Rescue where we had that supposed out of character moment for Edward right there, and then obviously Edward Strikes Out where Edward was really out of character. But is this Kiefer trying to give an explanation as to why Edward is skeptical of cranes because of Preston, of how rude he was to him and the others during the NWR's early days? Is that why Edward was reluctant to accept some new cranes because of his experience with Preston? If that's the case, then definitely makes sense.
Edward's judgment of cranes had since remained. A few days later, Edward and Marklin were shunting around the yards of the big station. Henry was close by, but he was not well. Long before he had been given special coal or his new shape, Henry was quite a poor steamer. The station master came over to Edward. "Henry's goods train is due out in half an hour," he said, but his crew can't steam him up. Edward was nervous. I can't take the train on my own, he said. Why can't Newbie help you? Asked Henry. Marklin was surprised. I suppose we could give it a try, he suggested. But Edward wasn't sure. What are you pulling, Henry? 3 tankers, 2 flatbeds, 4 vans and 5 coal trucks, replied Henry.
Whoa!
Your average goods train. It needs to be on the other side of the island before sundown, added the station master. Can you 2 do it? We'll try, sir, called Marklin from the corner of the yard. Excellent, said the station master. Don't worry about your train, Edward. We'll reschedule it for later. Edward was nervous.
Uh-oh.
It had been a long time since he had taken any sort of goods train. Before long, everything was ready. Edward was coupled up to the front of the train and Marklin at the front of the old blue engine. The guard blew his whistle and the 2 engines set off. The train was heavy, but Edward and Marklin were determined. They thundered through Wellsworth Station. Gordon, waiting with the express, had never seen quite a sight like it before. Then they tackled the huge gradient beyond the station, which would one day be known as Gordon's Hill. We know why, don't we?
Yep.
The trucks held back here, but the 2 engines were determined to see it through. Come on, come on, come on, cried Edward. We can do it, we can do it, gasped Marklin. The 2 engines were already red in the face, but as they tackled the hill, they were eager to carry on. You can't do it, you can't do it, we're winning, cried the trucks. But the engines didn't listen. Marklin could just see the top of the hill in sight. Come on, Edward, he shouted, we're nearly there. And with one final effort, Edward and Marklin brought the train over the hill. We've done it, gasped Edward. Marklin was overjoyed too. They cruised down the other side of the hill with no further trouble and arrived to deliver Henry's goods in good time.
Well done, the pair of you.
After a quick rest, a drink and a top-up of coal, Edward and Marklin returned to the yards of the big station. Edward returned to the sheds for a much-earned rest, while Marklin promised to finish up his work in the yard. He had just finished when Sir Charles arrived, accompanied by a smartly dressed man in a blue waistcoat and a cream hat. Ah, Marklin, said Sir Charles, just the engine I wanted to see. Well done on Henry's goods, by the way. I am incredibly proud of both you and Edward. Thank you, sir, said Marklin. Excuse me, sir, but who is this gentleman? This is my son, Bertram, replied Sir Charles.
Not Bertram.
One day he will be controller of the railway as I am. Bertram tipped his hat to the engine. My father has spoken highly of you, he said, which has made me reach a grand decision, said Sir Charles. Marklin, your performance around the yard has been wonderful. So much so that I plan to buy another tank engine. I can see you're capable enough to take on other duties. Sir Charles and Bertram then left. Marklin smiled for the first time all day. He had actually proved himself to be a useful engine. And the other tank engine that arrived, well, I'm sure many of you would guess who it was. That was a wonderful story, said Thomas when Edward had finished. Thanks for sharing it. You're quite welcome, replied Edward.
Why does Thomas look like that?
I'm just glad Marklin's settled on his old railway again. Hopefully he'll come visit soon. Me too, said Thomas. The next morning, Thomas and Percy were preparing the trains for the day at the big station. Edward's story last night was incredible, said Percy. I'm glad you enjoyed it, said Thomas.
Oh, Percy
listened as well. It put Gordon in his place too, laughed Percy. Thomas grinned. Percy, he said, Do you think it would have been strange if the Fat Director had brought another tank engine? Or, said Percy, he could have brought you as a different design. Thomas laughed. Imagine me as a J50, he chuckled. That would have been a splendid sight. Percy agreed. The two engines soon prepared the trains. Thomas was quite happy learning more about Sodor's past.
That's good to know.
But of course we know that one day Marklin, the international tank engine, would return to Sodor again. We would know him then as Puffer.
Puffer.
Won't we?
Yep. Well, there we have it. There we have it. Audio special that was released yesterday it was, and now, as you can see, it is now officially re-uploaded right here. So yeah, that was great to see Sodor's early days in the TVS canon. It was right there. We learned a little bit more about how he fit RWS characters like Alfred and Craven into his TVS timeline. Kiefer did learn a bit more about Marklin's story, and boy oh boy, Preston was literally just downright rude. He was right there. He would definitely make good friends with the Diesels. He would over steam engines right there. But you know, if I was to fit this story in my hybrid timeline, which contains both RWS and TVS and CGI stuff, I would have had this obviously set in the late 1910s to 1920s maybe. But basically, I could have it as to why Marklin was sent away, because even though I do like Kiefer's version of Marklin, I still prefer the Marklin from All Eyes on Dennis, that story that I reacted to on the last day of 2022. If you want to see match that out, you do the one-eyed Marklin. And basically, I could put as a reason to why Marklin was sent away in the first place. Not because of Thomas, because maybe you could have it where Preston was being so rude to Marklin, that Marklin just loses his temper, and he ends up banging into Preston, while Preston's trying to go beyond his limit and lift up all those rails, and have it as to where it ends up causing a serious accident where Preston ends up tumbling down the embankment and is pretty much left beyond repair he is, which obviously probably leads to him having to be scrapped. And although the Fat Controller knows that although Preston was wrong for his rude behavior, Marklin shouldn't have lost his temper that way to the point where he caused a serious accident. And potentially sealed Preston's fate right there. And then Preston would get scrapped, and Marklin would end up getting sent away as a result. You could also put that Marklin also had a little bit of a grudge for Tom, as he did when he arrived right there, that he felt that Thomas was being favoured against him while shunting in the yard right there, and he wanted to prove himself with that job. But obviously we know with the incident I mentioned, he loses his temper with Preston and causes an accident that leaves Preston beyond repair and having to be sent for scrap, and Marklin gets sent away as a result of it. And I remember in All Eyes on Dennis that Sir Stephen, like the Fat Controller, had hoped to purchase Marklin, but after hearing what had happened, after the railway heard, after he and the Marklin's other railway heard what had happened, they decided that would probably not do, and I bet Marklin was sent back to his old railway just so he could be punished for what he did right there. But that's how I would probably fit it in my canon right there. But would you fit this story in your canon, in this audio special in your canon, in your Thomas canon right there? Let me know in the comments down below. How would you fit it in the RWS canon, or your little own hybrid canon with RWS, TVS, and CGI stuff all together in one timeline? Let me know in the comments down below. But my thoughts on this, I loved it. Really enjoyed this audio special of how Kiefer incorporated the early days of the Northwestern Railway in the TVS canon right there. I mean, we learned like how Gordon had a bad tendency with shunters right there because of what Marklin did to him. Then obviously we had probably a reason as to why Edward was skeptical about cranes like Harvey and Rocky, and Harvey to the rescue and Edward strikes out, because of his experience of Preston right there. And we also got an insight, a prequel to the other railway audio story Kiefer did, Northwestern Beginning. He did on how Thomas was purchased, and then obviously his own little story in the Marklin engine also in season 1 of Audio Stories. But yeah, I really did enjoy this audio special. It was definitely worth the wait, Kiefer. Really enjoyed it, and yeah, let's just go ahead and see. Can't wait to see what else you have in store for your channel this summer. If you do want to see any of my previous Thomas reactions out there, whenever it's an audio story or Trains adaptation, I will have a playlist up in the top right corner of your screen right now. I'm going to end this recording because it's nearly half an hour long now. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button for me. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this audio special I reacted to. Also, let me know in the comments down below what other videos you want me to react to next. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok, links to both of them. Excuse me, will be in the description down below. Share this video, subscribe if you're new here, ring that bell to get notified when I upload new videos when I post in the community tab, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!